So it turns out, not surprisingly, that this Boris Johnson's new recent gaffe, especially trying to compare his Brexit to the Ukrainians fighting for their independence against a foreign power that is literally trying to occupy them and bombing them, to the Brexit vote, which again was a vote. We were not being occupied by the EU. They weren't forcing us to do anything or anything of the sort. We were part of a club that we were all part of, that we had quite a lot of influence in, that we had quite a lot of options in. We had opted out of a lot of the stuff, etc., etc. And it goes on and on. So this comparing the two is just not on a sane level. Even I think it was the former Finnish prime minister came out and said that Boris Johnson is in Brexit la la land if he thinks that he's somehow leading the world on the stage about Ukraine. But this is in the fantasy world of many of these Brexiteers, that this is currently what's going on, that Boris Johnson is leading the way, he is leading the charge. You know, he's just as brave as President Zelensky. In fact, there was even rumors very recently that he too wanted to go to Kiev to see Zelensky, no doubt not for, shall we say, improving relations between the country, more, shall we say, just for a good old photo op to say, oh, look, aren't I a brave boy? Of course, we could only hope maybe for a stray Russian missile, but of course that would cause huge problems in itself if Russia happened to, kill a sitting, prime minister of the UK. So obviously, of course, his trip got cancelled. But one thing about these reports, and of course we'll talk about the consequences in a bit, but one of the things that these remarks came from that isn't being reported about, of course, is that these remarks were apparently, or have been, the concoction of one Michael Gove. That it was Michael Gove who came up with this idea for Boris to say that. And remember, it wouldn't be the first time that Michael Gove has, shall we say, stabbed Boris in the back, like he did back in the 2016 Conservative leadership contest. Again, certainly interesting times, because this has had a knock-on effect. We'll get into the knock-on effect in a bit, but we just want to go over this piece, because this is quite interesting. Because if these comments really have come from Michael Gove, then what's going on in the Conservative Party? And are there bigger rifts than we even initially really thought? So let's go diving into this quickly, and then we'll talk about the consequences of what, shall we say, Boris's actions were. But of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So this comes from the New European with the title of Michael Gove concocted Boris Johnson's bizarre Brexit analogy. So whose bright idea was it for Boris Johnson to compare Ukraine's valiant struggle for survival with Britain voting to leave the European Union? Mandrake is reliably informed that there is much relevant lines in the Prime Minister's spring conference speech were urged upon him by none other than Michael Gove. Johnson was seeking advice about how to work a reference to Ukraine into his speech, and that was when Gove piped up with the Brexit analogy. Whispers of a very well-placed informant. This isn't, of course, the first time that one of Gove's bright ideas has turned out badly for Johnson. It was him who ultimately was behind Johnson's very ill-advised trip to Scotland a couple of years ago, precipitating a national booing competition. And of course, I reported very well at the time of how Gove's close ally, Luke Graham, Johnson's special advisor on the Union, had been agitating for the PM to make that very disastrous trip to Scotland. Graham ultimately ended up carrying the can, but as an avid supporter of Gove back in the 2019 Tory leadership contest, he would do nothing without first consulting him and then the department head in the Cabinet Office. Once bitten, though, Johnson should have been twice shy about when it came to taking Gove's helpful, shall we say, very suggestions. After all, it was reported that Gove's first big idea about how to respond to Vladimir Putin's aggression was to pointlessly have number 10 light up the colours in the Ukrainian flag. And of course, the Prime Minister would do very well never to forget how Gove sold him down the river during his very first disastrous run for the Conservative leadership back in 2016. So there seems to be more at play going on here than is initially being first suspected. And it looks like that Gove has once again essentially tripped up Boris quite deliberately, because there's one thing Conservatives really love, and that is that the UK has a lot of soft power. And they hate it, especially if that soft power gets damaged in any way or gets tarnished, or you've damaged our reputation across the board for soft power. And you saw this just a couple of years ago in the cutting of the foreign aid budget. That's why there was such a split amongst the Conservatives, especially the more moderate Conservatives who really care about the soft power, were so up in arms against cutting it, because that gives us a lot of soft power around the world. And again, these comments, these bizarre Brexit comments, which appear to have, again, been, shall we say, helpfully suggested by Michael Gove, have essentially landed Boris Johnson out firmly at the naughty table, because there is a conference happening this weekend about Ukraine, and guess who hasn't been invited? You guessed it, none other than Boris Johnson. And remember, even America has been invited to this conference, but Britain is going to be, once again, strangely very absent. So the fact that, again, we are not going to be there in the room, to quote Hamilton, the room where it all happens, is going to upset a lot, and I mean a lot, of Conservatives, because remember, the Brexiteers themselves were saying how powerful Britain truly was, how fantastic we all are. Many of them swallowed the Kool-Aid around that Brexit lie. They aren't going to be too happy about that. But that's what happens when you're a leader and you say, shall we say, irresponsible things, or in this case, when you take advice from Michael Gove here, who probably wants your job and wants you out as quickly as possible. So, needless to say, that has been a certainly very interesting turn of events and twisty turns for this certain event, because once again, it has proven that Boris is an idiot, the whole cabinet are idiots, and Brexit certainly wasn't a very good idea. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and thank you for tuning in. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and an explanation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.